The cathedral fell into a silence, so complete you could hear the rain hammering the stained glass windows. 200 of Manhattan's most feared power brokers watched, frozen, as the head of the Dracos organization pulled his bride against him. The 265-pound woman her own family had spent a decade hiding away was kissed like she was the only reason the world still turned. And every jaw in that cathedral dropped at once, in the gleaming, airless world of the Whitfield family. Appearance was not merely important. It was the entire currency of existence. Gerald Whitfield ran a regional crime network out of Westchester County, dressing it up as a boutique, hospitality, and luxury property empire. But it was his wife, Margot, who ran the family's public face, and in Margot's eyes, her elder daughter, Cordelia, was a permanent smudge on an otherwise flawless portrait. Cordelia Cora. To the handful of household staff, brave enough to speak to her with any real warmth, was 26 years old and weighed 265 pounds. Surrounded by whip-thin socialites and blade-jawed men in tailored suits, Cora's soft, generous curves and round, freckled face made her an easy and constant target. She wasn't merely overlooked. She was actively concealed. Whenever the Whitfields threw one of their glittering fundraisers to court corrupt councilmen and rival crime bosses, Cora was quietly rerouted to the back offices or the enormous catering kitchen. Her younger sister, Sabrina, was the family's shining asset, 25, blonde, with a waist Margot liked to boast you could span with 2 hands. Sabrina was the instrument Gerald intended to use to buy the family out of trouble. She was gorgeous and merciless, and she loved nothing more than reminding Cora exactly where she stood. "You're sweating, Cordelia." Margot's voice sliced through the kitchen steam like a shard of ice. Cora looked up from the massive spreadsheet she was reconciling. While the rest of her family treated her like unpaid help, she was, in fact, the quiet architect behind their legitimate businesses, a savant with numbers who caught the laundering errors their overpaid accountants routinely missed. "It's 94 degrees in here, Mother," Cora said evenly, pushing her thick tortoiseshell glasses back up her nose. She tugged at the oversized charcoal cardigan she wore even in July, to a shield against a body she'd been taught to be ashamed of since she was 9. "Don't you dare talk back to me." Margot's manicured finger jabbed the air. "The Dracos family arrives in 45 minutes. Nikos, Dracos, himself, is coming to collect on your father's debt personally. If tonight isn't flawless, we are finished. And so help me, Cordelia. If you wander out of this kitchen looking like a sack of laundry in that dreadful sweater, I will lock you in the wine cellar until New Year's." Cora swallowed the old, familiar knot of humiliation. "I have no plans to leave the kitchen. I still have the quarterly reconciliations to finish." "Good. Stay invisible. Sabrina is wearing the Valentino gown. She is going to charm Mr. Dracos. Senseless. He needs a wife. And an alliance with our family is his cleanest foothold north of the city. If Sabrina lands this, our debt disappears." Margot's eyes raked over Cora with open disgust. "Try not to touch the hors d'oeuvre. We need them for the real guests." The kitchen door swung shut behind her, and Cora let out a shuddering breath, brushing away a single tear before it could fall. She was used to it. The sting never fully dulled, though it simply moved, year after year. into some deeper, quieter place inside her. She turned back to her laptop, burying the ache beneath columns of numbers that never lied to her the way people did. 45 minutes later, the entire atmosphere of the Whitfield estate changed. The air thickened, charged with the unmistakable gravity of real power arriving. Nikos Drakos had come at 35. Nikos was a genuinely frightening man. He had taken control of the Drakos organization after his father was gunned down outside a Queen's social club, and in the years since he had built a reputation for glacial composure and total, surgical ruthlessness. He was tall, built like a heavyweight boxer beneath a bespoke charcoal suit, with eyes the color of wet slate flat, unreadable, and impossible to hold for long. Dinner was already underway in the estate's formal dining room. Cora could hear the muffled clink of crystal and Sabrina's rehearsed, tinkling laugh drifting down the corridor. She sat at the steel prep table, picking at a small plate of leftover orzo. Absorbed in an obscure tax provision she was documenting for one of her father's shell entities. The heavy kitchen door swung open without warning. Cora didn't look up. Assuming it was one of the catering staff, "I need ice." The voice was low, rough, unmistakably not staff. Tora froze. She lifted her head slowly. Standing in the doorway was a man who looked carved out of granite and shadow. Nikos Drakos. He'd shed his jacket somewhere. His white shirt was open at the collar, revealing the edge of a dark tattoo along his collarbone. He stopped the instant he saw her. Cora's heart slammed against her ribs. She crossed her arms instinctively over her stomach, folding in on herself in her chair. The ice machine's by the pantry, she stammered. Pointing, he didn't move toward it. His dark eyes stayed locked on her messy bun, her flushed cheeks, the heavy sweater, the open laptop beside her half-eaten dinner. There was no disgust in his expression, the kind her mother wore so effortlessly. Instead, there was something else, entirely intense. Unsettling calculation, he crossed the kitchen slowly and stopped beside her table, leaning down to glance at her screen. "You're the one doing the books," he said. It wasn't a question. Cora blinked. Excuse me, your father's official accountant is a fool named Preston. But I saw the corrected filings that went out last week. The reconciliations. The flagged transfers." His gaze lifted from the screen to her face. "That was you. I just help sometimes," Cora whispered, shrinking from how close he stood. He smelled like cedar and good bourbon, and something darker underneath. His eyes drifted down over her, slow and deliberate, not the embarrassed, sliding away glance she got from every man in her family, but a real, heavy look, tracing the curve of her hips beneath the shapeless fabric, up to the fullness of her chest, and finally settling on her mouth. Something dark flickered behind his eyes. "What's your name?" His voice dropped another register. "Cordelia." She breathed. Before he could say anything else, the kitchen door burst open. Margot rushed in, face already pale. "Mr. Drakos." "We were wondering where." She stopped dead, eyes widening in horror as she registered exactly how close Nikos Drakos was standing to her hidden, unwanted daughter. "I am so sorry, Mr. Drakos," she said, rushing forward. The staff was supposed to keep the kitchen clear. "Please, to come back to the table," Sabrina was just telling everyone about her semester in Florence. Nikos held Cora's Hase for one long, unbearable second before he finally straightened. "Right," he said, voice suddenly flat and cold. He turned his back on Margot without another word and walked out. Margot rounded on Cora, fury twisting her face. "What did you say to him? What did you do?" "Nothing. He just asked for ice," Cora said, her hands shaking. "If you have ruined this for your sister, Cordelia, I will make you regret it for the rest of your miserable life." Margot spun and hurried after him, heels clicking a furious rhythm on the marble. Cora sat alone in the sudden quiet, hands trembling in her lap. She didn't understand what had just happened, but the way Nikos Drakos had looked at her like she was a puzzle he'd suddenly decided to solve, like she was actually, finally seen, sent a strange, terrifying warmth straight through her chest. The following evening, the tension in the Whitfield sitting room was thick enough to cut with a blade. Gerald sat sweating in his leather wingback chair. Margot stood rigid near the fireplace, while Sabrina lounged across the chaise in a skin-tight emerald dress, twirling a lock of blonde hair, looking supremely pleased with herself. Cora wasn't in the room. She'd been ordered to stay upstairs in her bedroom, but the old colonial house had thin heating vents, and Cora was crouched by the floor grate, listening. Nikos had returned, his brutal second-in-command Renzo at his side. Pleasantries were over. The Whitfields owed the Drakos organization $8 million in intercepted shipments, and Nikos had come for his payment. "The money's gone." "Nikos," Gerald's voice trembled up through the vent. "My men were compromised, but we have leveraged the warehouse district in Rye. We have a proposal. I don't need your warehouses." "Gerald." Nikos's tone was smooth. "Bored. Lethal. I already control the unions that move through them. What I need is total loyalty from your sector. I need blood ties so you never think about crossing me again." Margot's voice slid in. "Honeyed, which is exactly why we're offering a union. Mr. Drakos, our families joined by marriage. My daughter, Sabrina, she's young, radiant, entirely devoted to legacy. She'd make an extraordinary wife for a man like you." Sabrina cooed softly. "I've always admired you." "Nikos." Silence stretched below. Cora pressed her ear tighter to the grate, feeling something in her chest quietly break. Of course it was Sabrina. Sabrina got the terrifying, magnetic crime boss. Cora got locked in her room like an embarrassing secret. A marriage. Nikos finally said, the word rolling off his tongue like a threat. "Yes, that could suit my needs. A legal claim on your assets, and a hostage in my house. Very tidy." Margot exhaled audibly. "Wonderful. We can announce the engagement this week." "But..." Nikos cut in, and his voice sliced through the room like a blade. "There seems to be some confusion. I don't want the blonde." Cora gasped silently, hand flying to her mouth. "I beg your pardon." Jal stammered. "I don't want Sabrina." Nikos said flatly. "She's a liability. Loud. Careless. And she flirts with off-duty detectives at charity galas. You think my men don't notice things like that?" Sabrina let out an outraged shriek. "How dare you?" "Quiet." The single word landed with such terrifying weight, the room went instantly silent. "I'm forgiving an $8 million debt. In exchange, I take your daughter, but I take the one who actually has a brain. The one who fixed your cooked books. I want Cordelia. Upstairs. Cora fell backward off her knees onto the rug. Hand pressed hard over her mouth. The whole world tilting sideways. He wants me. Downstairs. Chaos erupted instantly. Cordelia Margot's shriek shredded every ounce of practiced elegance from her voice. You cannot possibly be serious. Mr. Dracos. She is. She's what? Margot Nikos's voice dropped into something dangerous. She's an embarrassment. Sabrina screamed. She's enormous. You cannot possibly want her over me. There was a heavy thud, Renzo's palm slamming the table. Watch your mouth when you address the boss. He warned. Listen to me very carefully. Nikos said, and the deadly calm in his voice made Cora shudder through the floor above him. I am marrying Cordelia. We wed in 26 days. She moves to my estate the day of the wedding. If you hide her, mistreat her, or try to substitute this useless blonde at the altar, I will burn this house to the foundation with everyone inside it. Do we have an understanding? Gerald. Yes. Gerald whimpered. Yes. Mr. Dracos. Cordelia is yours. The front door slammed a minute later. Footsteps thundered up the stairs. Cora barely scrambled away from the vent before her bedroom door flew open. Margot stood there, face scarlet, chest heaving. Behind her, Sabrina was crying furious. Jealous tears. You planned this. Sabrina screamed, storming into the room. You disgusting, scheming cow. What did you do to him? Nothing. I swear I didn't do anything. Cora cried. Backing into her dresser, Margot seized her arm. Nails biting into soft flesh. I don't know what sick game he's playing. Cordelia. Maybe he wants to humiliate your father by marrying something so grotesque. But you will go through with this. And you will make absolutely sure he forgives our debt. Don't you dare. For 1 second. Imagine. He actually wants you. Margot's eyes dragged over her daughter's body with naked contempt. Men like Nikos Dracos do not desire women like you. You are a transaction. A punchline. The next 26 days became a private torture chamber. Margot and Sabrina inflicted every cruelty they could invent. They forced Cora onto a punishing juice cleanse, mocking her when the scale refused to move fast enough to satisfy them. Late one night, unable to sleep, Cora crept down to the kitchen and found Odalis, the family's longtime housekeeper, quietly icing a small plate of lemon cake. Odalis had worked for the Whitfields for 19 years, and she was the only person under that roof who had ever once called Cora beautiful and meant it. Sit, Odalis said, not looking up, sliding the plate across the counter. Eat. Nobody has to know. Cora. Sangonto a stool. Hands trembling. What if he's really doing this to humiliate my father? What if I get to that altar and he laughs at me? Odalis studied her for a long moment, then reached out and tucked a loose strand of hair behind Cora's ear, the way she used to when Cora was small and crying after one of Margot's tirades. In 19 years, Mia, I have watched men in this house lie about money, lie about loyalty, lie about love. I have never once seen a man look at a woman the way that one looked at you in this kitchen. Whatever he is not laughing. She pushed the cake closer. Eat, You are going to need your strength for whatever comes next. It was the first real kindness Cora had been offered in weeks, and she carried it with her, quietly, through the rest of that sleepless night. But the true low point came during the wedding gown fitting. Margot had hired an exclusive bridal designer who plainly shared her contempt for larger bodies. In the mirrored fitting room, Cora stood in her slip trying to cover herself, while the designer, a severe, bird-like woman named Miss Thistlewood, clicked her tongue disapprovingly. So much fabric required. Ms. Thistlewood sighed, cinching a measuring tape tight enough to leave red welts on Cora's waist. I can try dark panel inserts along the sides to create the illusion of less bulk, but there are limits to what illusion can achieve. Sabrina, sipping Prosecco on the velvet settee, laughed cruelly. Just wrap her in a tablecloth and cinch it with rope. It's not as though the groom's actually going to look at her. Tears pricked at Cora's eyes as she stared at her own reflection, her round stomach, her thick thighs. To the silver stretch marks, she'd hated her entire life. She felt worthless. A prop. A cruel joke about to be played on 200 wedding guests. Then the boutique's front door chimed, and heavy boots echoed across the hardwood. Everyone out. The command cracked through the shop like a whip, and the room went instantly still. Nikos Drakos stood in the doorway of the fitting room, his eyes blazing with a fury so total it seemed to suck the air from the space. Renzo stood behind him, blocking the exit. Mr. Drakos. Margot gasped, scrambling upright. It's terrible luck to see the bride before I set out. Nikos stepped further in, pointing at Miss Thistlewood. Put the tape down. His gaze cut to Sabrina and Margot. Both of you. Now. Terrified by the sheer violence radiating off him. All three scattered from the room. Renzo pulled the heavy doors shut, leaving Cora entirely alone with the man she was about to marry. Cora was hyperventilating, arms crossed desperately over her body, cheeks scorched with humiliation. Please, she whispered, eyes squeezed shut. Please, don't look at me. Nikos shrugged off his suit jacket. He crossed the room slowly and draped the warm, heavy fabric over her shoulders, pulling it gently closed over her chest. Startled by the tenderness of the gesture, Cora opened her eyes and looked up at him. There was no disgust on his face, only a clenched jaw and dark, protective anger. They've been starving you, he said quietly, brushing a thumb beneath the shadowed circle under her eye. They just want me to look presentable, Cora whispered, tears spilling over. I know I'm not what you actually want. I know I'm just a business arrangement. Nikos, my mother said this is some way of humiliating my father. You don't have to keep up the pretense with me. Something flared behind his eyes. He stepped closer, large hands closing over her shoulders, pulling her flush against his chest. Your mother is a shallow, bitter woman, he said, low and rough. I don't play games with my name, Cordelia, and I don't marry anyone as a punchline. I chose you exactly as you are. If you ever let those vultures make you feel ashamed of this body again, I will make sure they regret it for the rest of their lives. Do you understand me? Cora searched his face for the lie. She found none, only a terrifying, possessive honesty she had never once been offered in 26 years of life, for the first time in her entire life. Cordelia Whitfield felt wanted. I've brought my own tailor, Nikos said, stepping back but keeping one hand at her waist. He's waiting outside. He's going to build you a dress that celebrates every single inch of you. You are going to be a queen. Cordelia, my queen. And this entire city is going to learn to bow. The wedding day arrived under a violent thunderstorm. Inside the Cathedral of Our Lady of Perpetual Sorrow in Astoria, 200 of New York's most dangerous people packed the pews. The air, toxic with anticipation. The Whitfield loyalists whispered maliciously to the Dracos soldiers, fully expecting a bloated disaster stuffed into ivory tulle. But in the vestibule, Cora stared at her reflection in genuine awe. Nikos's tailor hadn't tried to hide her body. He'd celebrated it. Her gown was a masterwork of heavy champagne silk and hand-sewn Chantilly lace, an off-the-shoulder neckline framing her collarbones, a corseted bodice nipping her waist before flaring dramatically over her wide hips. Her dark hair was threaded with tiny opals. She didn't look like an outcast. She looked like a queen who had simply been waiting for someone to notice her crown. Gerald offered his arm, refusing to meet her eyes. As the heavy oak doors groaned open and the organ swelled, Cora stepped into the aisle. The malicious whispering died instantly. A stunned, total silence dropped over the cathedral heads, turning, eyes widening. Not in mockery, but in genuine, unguarded shock. She walked with a terrified but undeniable dignity. At the altar, Nikos stood rigid in a stark black tuxedo. The instant he saw her, the cold, calculating boss of the Dracos organization visibly shifted. His chest rose and fell. His dark eyes devoured every curve, every fold of lace, as though she were the only oxygen left in the building. When Gerald tried to formally present her, Nikos ignored him completely, stepping down to take Cora's trembling hand in his own warm, calloused one. "You look extraordinary," he murmured, thumb tracing over her knuckles. The traditional mass passed in a tense blur. In the front pew, Margot wore charcoal gray, practically in mourning, while Sabrina glared with undisguised resentment. They were simply waiting, both of them, for the punchline they were certain was coming. "Do you, Nikos, take Cordelia to be your lawfully wedded wife?" the priest asked. "I do." His voice rang out, absolute and unwavering. Cora looked up at this dangerous, terrifying man and saw, for the first time in her life, the one thing she'd craved above everything else: total protection. "I do," she whispered. "You may kiss the bride." Margot leaned forward, a small, smug smile forming. This was it, the moment Nikos would give her overweight daughter a cold, obligatory peck to seal the contract, humiliating her in front of everyone who mattered. Instead, Nikos turned fully toward Cora. His hand slid into her hair, cupping the back of her head. He pulled her flush against his body, bent her slightly backward, and kissed her like the entire cathedral had ceased to exist. It was consuming, possessive, utterly unguarded. Cora gasped against his mouth, fingers curling into his lapels, kissing him back with a desperate, disbelieving fire. A collective gasp rippled through the pews. Someone dropped a hymnal with a sharp crack against the stone floor. Margot's face drained the color of ash, her smug smile shattering. Sabrina let out a strangled, furious cry. This was no arranged formality. The boss of the Dracos organization was completely, unmistakably obsessed with the woman her own family had spent a decade hiding. When they finally broke apart, Cora's cheeks glowed. Nikos turned to the stunned crowd, keeping her tucked firmly at his side. His triumphant smile curdled into something far more dangerous as his gaze locked onto the front pew. "We're skipping the receiving line," he announced flatly over the shocked murmurs. "But first, we settle the Whitfield debt." Renzo, his underboss, stepped forward and tossed a thick manila folder onto the marble floor. Photographs and bank statements spilled out at Gerald and Margot's feet. "That," Nikos said, his voice landing like a verdict, "is proof that the 8 million taken from my shipments wasn't stolen by a rival crew. It was embezzled by your wife, Gerald, and your favorite daughter, Sabrina." Chaos exploded through the cathedral. "You used shell accounts," Nikos went on, "thinking you could hand me your thin, useless daughter as a peace offering and walk away, richer. It's a lie." Sabrina shrieked. Stumbling backward, Nikos looked down at Cora, his eyes softening for one fractional second before hardening again to slate. "My wife is no longer a Whitfield," he bellowed, voice shaking the stone rafters. "She is a Dracos. She is untouchable. As for the rest of you," his gaze cut to Renzo, "take them to the basement," as panicked screaming erupted through the pews. Nikos wrapped his jacket around Cora's shoulders, lifted her effortlessly into his arms as though she weighed nothing at all, and carried his bride out through the cathedral doors into the storm. The drive from Astoria to Nikos's sprawling penthouse in Chelsea passed in a blur of rain-slicked windows and adrenaline. Cora sat in the back of the armored Bentley, shivering despite the heavy tuxedo jacket still draped over her. Everything that had happened was crashing down on her at once. Her parents and sister in the hands of the Mafia, and herself, entirely alone, with the single most dangerous man in New York. Nikos poured 2 glasses of neat bourbon from the car's crystal decanter and handed her one. "Drink," he said gently. "It'll steady you." She took a sip, the liquid burning a slow trail down her throat. "What are you going to do to them?" His jaw tightened. "Embezzlement carries a death sentence in my world. Cordelia, your mother and sister ran your father's stolen money through Nevada shells and a private account at Bank of Malta. They thought they were clever. They were sloppy." He turned to face her fully, his eyes intense in the shadowed car. "But they're your blood, so their fate belongs to you." Cora blinked, stunned. "Me, you are my wife. You carry my name. In my house, you carry absolute authority." He reached out, thumb tracing gently along her jaw. "Tomorrow, you decide what happens to the Whitfield legacy. Tonight, you just breathe." When they reached the penthouse, Cora braced herself for a gilded cage, a separate guest suite. A transaction quietly concluded. Instead, Nikos led her straight to the master suite, an enormous glass-walled room floating above the glittering Chelsea skyline. "Bathrooms through there," he said, unbuttoning his cuffs. "Take your time. I'll have food brought up." An hour later, Cora emerged from the marble shower wrapped in a black silk robe she'd found in the closet, one of his, fast and soft, clinging comfortably to her wide hips and heavy thighs. She felt raw, stripped of every oversized sweater and protective layer she'd hidden behind for years. She walked out to find a feast spread across the glass, dining table, seared filet. Warm, sourdough. Roasted vegetables glossed in butter food she hadn't been permitted to touch in weeks. Nikos sat at the edge of the massive bed in dark sweatpants. Shirtless. Intricate tattoos winding across a torso marked with old scars. When he looked up and saw her, the hunger in his expression was unmistakable, not polite tolerance, but raw, undeniable want. "Sit," he said. "Eat. Cordelia, you've been starved for almost a month." At her first bite, a tear slipped down her cheek. The rich taste of real food combined with sheer exhaustion broke something loose inside her, and she began to cry quietly at first, then in full, heaving sobs. Nikos was out of his seat instantly, kneeling beside her chair, wiping the tears away with his thumbs. "Hey," he murmured, astonishingly gentle for a man who ordered executions before breakfast. "Who told you that you weren't allowed to take up space in this world?" "My whole life." Cora wept, staring down at her stomach. "I've been told I'm disgusting, that no one could ever want me unless they were forced to." Something dark and protective moved across his face. He stood, drew her gently to her feet, and backed her slowly toward the floor-to-ceiling window. City lights pooling gold across her skin. "Look at me." When she did, he pressed his body against hers, making certain she felt exactly how much he wanted her. "Your mother is a hollow woman who worships bone. I worship this." His hand spanned her wide waist, sliding down to grip her full thighs. "You are soft. Cordelia, you are brilliant. You are exactly what I crave, and I intend to spend the rest of my life proving it." He kissed her then slow, deep, reverent. For the first time in her life, Cora didn't try to hold her stomach in or hide her arms. She melted into him, fingers tangling in his dark hair, finally feeling the terrifying, beautiful weight of being truly wanted. The next morning, Nikos took her to a secured warehouse in Bushwick. Inside, Gerald, Margot, and Sabrina sat tied to metal folding chairs, bruised and visibly terrified, the fluorescent lights overhead buzzing like an accusation. When the heavy steel door rolled open and Cora stepped through, flanked by Nikos and Renzo, the room went dead, silent. Cora wore a tailored crimson power suit Nikos's people had procured for her overnight. It hugged her curves like armor. She didn't look down at the floor the way she'd been trained to for 26 years. She stood tall, a queen surveying her prisoners. "Cordelia, please." Margot's voice cracked, straining against the zip ties binding her wrists. "Tell him to let us go. We're your family. You're a monster." Sabrina spat, her blonde hair matted, her ruined designer dress hanging off one shoulder. "You stole my life." Cora walked slowly toward her sister, studying the beautiful, cruel girl who had tormented her for a quarter of a century. Then she looked at the thick black ledger sitting on the metal table beside them. The same kind of ledger she'd hidden behind for most of her life. "I didn't steal anything, Sabrina," she said, her voice icy and calm. "You dug your own grave. I simply refused to climb in and dig beside you." She turned to Nikos. "I don't want their blood on my hands, but I don't want them to have anything either." Nikos nodded. Smooth and immediate. "Done." Cora turned back to her parents. Gerald, Margot, You're being stripped of the Rye estate. Your accounts at Wells Fargo and Citibank are frozen and seized by the Dracos organization, effective this morning. You're going to take the $700 in cash Renzo is about to hand you. And you're going to get on a bus to Nebraska. If you ever set foot in New York again, or if you ever speak my name out loud to anyone, Nikos will end you both, quietly. And without a second thought, Gerald wept openly, his shoulders shaking. Margot stared at her daughter in absolute, horrified disbelief. "You can't do this to us," she whispered. "We are high society." "Not anymore," Cora said coldly. "Now you're invisible. Enjoy it." She paused at the door, glancing back one final time. "I did. For 26 years. 8 months later." The New York underworld had shifted dramatically, and everyone understood exactly why. The Dracos organization had never been more profitable. Nikos remained the muscle, the fear, the final word. But Cordelia Dracos had become the brain, operating out of the Chelsea penthouse. Cora had entirely restructured the organization's legitimate holdings. She absorbed the Whitfield real estate portfolio outright, liquidated its toxic assets, and quietly laundered Nikos's casino revenue through boutique commercial properties along the Hudson waterfront. She had become a financial phantom, a genius who saw numbers in 3 dimensions, and had never once, in her whole life, been happier. She'd bloomed. The oversized sweaters were long gone, replaced by custom silk dresses that celebrated her thick, hourglass frame. Nikos treated her like something sacred, guarding her fiercely, but never once caging her. But peace, in this world, never lasted. Trouble arrived wearing the name Besnik Krasniki, a brutal underboss out of Corona who believed Nikos had gone soft by marrying a useless, overweight liability. Besnik requested a sit-down at a private terrace lounge overlooking Battery Park to renegotiate a shipping port agreement. Nikos arrived with Renzo and a dozen armed men, and he brought Cora, Besnik, a massive man with a scar cutting through one eyebrow, laughed out loud when Cora walked in, heels clicking confidently against the polished floor. "Nikos, my friend, you bring the wife to a business meeting. What? You need someone to taste your food for poison." His soldiers chuckled along with him. Nikos's hand drifted toward the weapon at his waistband, eyes flashing with lethal intent. Cora placed a calm hand against his chest, silently staying him. She smiled, a cold, precise smile she had learned directly from her husband. She took the seat directly across from Besnik. Renzo set a thick black binder in front of her. "I'm not here to taste your food, Mr. Krasnik," Cora said smoothly, flipping the binder open. "I'm here to audit your life." Besnik's laughter died. "Excuse me." Cora adjusted her designer frames. 5 weeks ago, you threatened to seize our shipping containers at the Sunset Park terminal, claiming an unpaid tariff. I've spent that time reviewing your accounts. Specifically, the offshore holding companies you keep through the Bank of Nicosia, the ones your own leadership back in Tirana has never seen. The color drained from Besnik's face. "How could you? You've been skimming your own organization's profits for 3 years. Besnik," Cora continued, voice echoing through the silent room. She slid a stack of transaction records across the table. $3.2 million. hidden in a trust under your mistress's maiden name. If I press one button on this tablet, every one of these documents goes directly to your leadership overseas. You won't make it past the Newark tolls before they put a bullet in you. Besnik sat frozen, sweat beading along his hairline. His men traded nervous, panicked glances. Nikos leaned over Cora's chair, resting his hands possessively on her shoulders. A wicked, triumphant grin spreading across his face. You were saying something about my wife being a liability. Besnik, what do you want to do now? What do you want? Besnik choked out. We keep the Sunset Park terminal. Cora said crisply. You waive the tariff, and you pay a 15% surcharge on all future shipments for wasting our afternoon. Or I send the email. Besnik swallowed hard, looking at the woman he'd completely, catastrophically underestimated. She held his entire life in her soft, manicured hands. Deal, he whispered, as they walked out into the crisp evening air. Nikos pulled Cora into a shadowed alcove beside the building. He pressed her gently against the stone wall, hands gripping her wide hips. You, he growled against her neck, are the single most terrifying, magnificent creature God ever put on this earth. I have never in my life been this turned on. Cora laughed breathlessly as his mouth trailed up along her jaw. I told you I was good with numbers. He pulled back slightly, searching her eyes. You know, I've been turning something over in my head for months. Your mother and sister. They were sloppy, but the trail they left was almost too obvious. Like someone had deliberately weakened the firewall so my people would find the embezzlement. Cora's smile widened, a mischievous light dancing in her eyes. Nikos's breath caught as understanding dawned across his face. It was you. You hacked their accounts. You planted the trail for my forensic team to find. My family locked me in a kitchen for 26 years. Nikos, Cora whispered, wrapping her arms around his neck. I knew exactly what you were. I knew what happened to people who stole from you. I just needed a way out. I needed a monster of my own to burn their house down for me. Nikos stared at her in complete awe. She hadn't been a victim waiting patiently to be rescued. She had been the one spinning the entire web. From the very beginning, she had chosen him. You brilliant, beautiful witch, he murmured, voice thick with dark adoration. He kissed her again. Entirely indifferent to the armed guards, waiting a respectful distance away, Cordelia Drakos was no longer the hidden, unwanted daughter shut away in a kitchen. She was the undisputed queen of the New York underworld, and heaven help anyone who ever again told her to make herself small. Did Cordelia's quiet, devastating revenge leave you speechless? From the daughter no one wanted to see, to the absolute queen of the underworld, Cordelia proved that real power and real beauty have nothing whatsoever to do with a dress size. If you loved watching this brilliant, curvy mastermind outsmart her toxic family and a rival crime boss to claim her crown, hit that like button and share this story with someone who loves a fierce, unstoppable heroine